Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Ryan here from Game Essays, back with another tier list. Been a bit since I've done one, but I was inspired given that it's the holiday season, it's getting colder out. Why not rank the ice and snow themed Zelda dungeons? I have ranked some of these 3D Zelda dungeons before in other tier lists, but I've never really talked about the 2D dungeons, so it'd be fun to talk about some of these 2D snow and ice themed dungeons in this particular tier list. Also, don't forget, join the Discord if you want to talk some Zelda. We got a great community there. Link to that is in the description. But let's get into this tier list. So I'm going to try to remember to go in release order, but if I'm a little out of order, it doesn't really matter. We don't have a ton here, and I didn't look at the multiplayer games. I was sticking just to the single player games. So, first ever ice themed dungeon was the Ice Palace from A Link to the Past. So that, for me, may actually be a C tier dungeon. I think this is probably one of the most annoying dungeons in A Link to the Past. The great thing about this dungeon is you do get the blue mail, which means you take less damage after that point. And you can also get an item, I believe, in Misery Mire to make a puzzle to get said mail, if I'm not mistaken, a little bit easier, or at least make some of the other puzzles easier. The cane that lets you put the little red block over a switch, but there is other ways to do the puzzle without having that item. It just makes things a little bit easier. But yeah, most people, when they think of A Link to the Past in dungeons they don't like, it's usually this dungeon and probably Misery Mire as well. And that is because the ice controls are very annoying and very, very slippery. Even simple things like trying to go downstairs in some rooms can be really, really tough because it takes so long for Link to kind of get a grip, to be honest, before he can actually, he can get some traction to go down the stairs. So this one is definitely tough. You get a lot of penguins flying at you, which are interesting enemies for the series. It is a tough one. The boss is a little underwhelming, but overall it's not a terrible dungeon, but it's probably up there as one of the most annoying in this particular game. Then we had in Ocarina of Time, the Ice Caverns. This is barely a dungeon, so I'm putting it in D tier. And like I said, it doesn't really count itself as a dungeon anyway, so I don't really have any issues kind of putting it down here. But it does give you a key item. You get the iron boots here. There is technically a boss, which is just a white wolfos that you can kill in exactly one jump slash. Nevertheless, it doesn't give you, no boss yields like a heart container or anything, so it's not like a true proper boss. You don't get like a medallion like you do with the other proper dungeons in Ocarina of Time. And it's really like 3 rooms kind of, so barely a dungeon. It definitely belongs in the D tier. Now, Majora's Mask, we have Snowhead Temple. And to be honest, this is the dungeon I'm not like a huge fan of either. I love Goron Link in Majora's Mask, but this dungeon, it's very, very vertical. That is definitely the gimmick of it. And a lot of it involves very treacherous paths where you're rolling with Goron Link, and if you fall all the way down to the bottom. That being said, I do enjoy it more than the Ice Palace. I'd probably put it in B tier. I may move it. But yeah, you get the fire arrows here, so there's a lot of melting ice with your bow. And there's just a lot of, rolling around with Goron Link, trying not to fall, doing your best. But I do think it's a tougher dungeon compared to a lot of the 3D Zelda dungeons. Definitely up there. Not the toughest, but certainly, I would say, above average difficulty on this one. Next would be the Sword and Shield Maze from Oracle of Seasons. Now this one is fire and ice themed, but because it at least has a portion of it that is ice themed, I felt that it was appropriate to include it. This is one of the toughest ice block puzzles I've ever done. Games like Zelda and Pokemon tend to have a lot of ice block puzzles anytime there's like an ice theme involved. And the one actually pictured here, it's probably very small for you to see, but it's one of the toughest ice block puzzles I've ever had to do. I got a little bit of help from my wife, then girlfriend at the time when I was doing this. because it was that challenging. And I do enjoy this dungeon. It is quite a gauntlet. And one of the toughest dungeons, I think, in any Zelda game. I'm sure Oracle of Ages, though it's been a while since I played it, has some tough dungeons too. I don't think they have any ice dungeons. If so, then I missed it for this tier list. But Seasons, this is definitely, and I believe it is the final dungeon in Oracle of Seasons. This is a really, really tough dungeon. Some of the other things you have to do is there's a bunch of like mine carts, and you have to bring these crystals or like ice block crystal things like down. You have to throw them down these holes so that they can then like cool the lava on the bottom floor to basically get to the boss. So you're kind of using the ice to cool the fire, but there's a lot of ice sections above that you have to solve. Very daunting dungeon, but very satisfying as well, and very interesting. So I think I'm gonna put this one in B tier. It's a very solid dungeon, very challenging, but not my favorite, but definitely not my least favorite either. Probably less annoying than the Ice Palace, though much longer. That is the thing. It's definitely more of an endurance test for sure. I think it took me like 2 hours to beat that dungeon. Okay, next up, we have the Minish Cap, and this is the Temple of Droplets. So this is kind of like a water and ice themed dungeon. And atmosphere, I think, plays a big role for this one for me. It has one of the best themes in Minish Cap, and it's just an overall great dungeon theme in all the dungeon themes. Maybe it's like a top 15 dungeon theme, in my opinion, in all of Zelda. Temple of Droplets is great. The main kind of gimmick is the boss is frozen, and you're slowly opening up doors so that the light can shine through and melt the boss. So you have some ice and water kind of puzzles. I know there's some like lily pad sections where you're using the gust jar to get across. But overall, it's a really cool dungeon. And I think atmosphere alone with the amazing theme, and like I said, I like the gimmick of like you kind of see the boss very early on and you're just unfreezing it. It goes into the A tier for me. Now, I believe what we have probably is Twilight Princess next. It might be Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess Snowpeak Ruins. For those who know me and have seen some of my other tier lists know that this is one of my favorite dungeons ever, so it immediately goes up to the S tier. Snowpeak Ruins, fantastic dungeon. You have an abandoned kind of Hyrule royalty stronghold that now is being lived in. You got Yetis who are just living there, living their best life until the Mirror of Twilight makes Yetta sick, and you're helping the Yeti make some soup. Yeto, I believe his name is. You're helping him make soup, which you get to heal yourself, which is nice. As they slowly unlock this fortress for you, and you explore more and more, and eventually you get to the Mirror of Twilight and you face Blizzetta, which is Yetta corrupted. But there's a lot of cool stuff. You're using a lot of cannonballs to break open ice, frozen areas to get to other sections. You're using Wolf Link a lot in this too. You get the ball and chain, which is just a really fun item for just smashing any ice or other things. It's an incredibly well-themed dungeon. It has a lot of heart. It has great story, great theming. It's got ice block puzzles, which I enjoy. It's got everything going for it, and that kind of culminates in one of the best dungeons ever. So obviously it's going to be pretty high up on this list as well. Next, I believe, is Phantom Hourglass Temple of Ice, one that I think people sleep on, but is one of my personal favorite 2.5 or 2D dungeons. I feel like, people call the DS games like 2.5D because it's kind of 3D, but also 2D. But to me, they play like 2D dungeons more than they play like 3D dungeons. So it's one of my favorite 2D or 2.5D, whatever, if we're going to be technical. Anyway, it goes up in the S tier, not S tier, I'm sorry. It goes up in the A tier. It doesn't quite hit S tier, but it's a great dungeon, underrated. And what I love about it is the grappling hook is kind of the main item of this dungeon. And they use the grappling hook in ways that Wind Waker never could. So it takes a great item from the Wind Waker, but expands upon it. You can you can use it like a tightrope so that you can walk across two little stakes on the ground, so you can get across gaps by walking it like a tightrope. You can bounce back arrows, I believe. Yeah, there's like a puzzle where you can basically use it to bounce arrows off of. And then you can basically use it like a wrestling rope, almost like you're in a wrestling ring, and you bounce off the rope and to get momentum to get across gaps. So it's really, really cool and very creative, and I just really like this dungeon a lot. Now, Spirit Tracks also has a snow dungeon. My memory of it is very vague, so I had to watch some video just to refresh my memory. But I think it's a very solid dungeon, and I would probably just put it on the lower end of B tier. It does have some cool, interesting gimmicks that I haven't really seen before, at least in the way that they do it. And that is, there is kind of the blue fire, and you can use your boomerang to basically freeze parts of the water. So you use your stylus to kind of mark the path of your boomerang, much like you could in Phantom Hourglass. But the blue fire would like freeze the water to get across parts of the water. There's tons of ice block puzzles in this dungeon as well. Like I said, been a while since I played it, but doesn't quite hit the same note for me that Phantom Hourglass or Minish Cap does, but I do think it's a really cool dungeon. And Spirit Tracks dungeons, it's just hard to remember a lot of them. Lastly, A Link Between Worlds, we have the Ice Ruins. Now this one, kind of like Snowhead, has a lot of verticality to it, a lot of different floors, and you're kind of putting together all these little skinny little walkways by hitting switches. Been a while since I played this one as well. A lot of people seem to think this is probably one of the hardest dungeons in A Link Between Worlds. I personally, just based off of, I don't remember too much about thinking one way or the other about this dungeon, so I think it's going to kind of fall into C tier for me. And maybe my mind could definitely change once I replay A Link Between Worlds. Like I said, it's been a while, so Spirit Tracks Link Between Worlds are definitely the ones it's been the longest since I played them, so my memory is kind of the faintest on that. But I think this is where I can comfortably stand, and we almost made this, like, unintentionally, I made this kind of perfect formation here. This kind of building block, and it's like the perfect just what a distribution basically of how things are. So there you go for the ice dungeons. This is where I stand. Definitely let me know where you guys stand with the ice and snow themed dungeons. Of course, if I missed anything, let me know. But what is your all-time favorite ice/snow themed dungeon? Let me know in the comments. Remember the Discord, make sure to join. Hang out with us, talk some Zelda. We got Tears of the Kingdom coming out next year. It's not too far away. Gonna be having plenty of conversations around that. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.